Good evening, everybody. The meeting will start in about 3 minutes, so if you can start finding your way to a seat or somewhere comfortable, we'll get the meeting starting here just shortly.
Good evening. My name is George Morris. I'm the unit chief for the Nevada Yuba Placer unit of CALFire. Tonight we called this meeting tonight to give you an overview of kind of the conditions that were leading up to this fire, what's happening around this fire. And when I say this fire, it's 4 fires at the same time, taxing a lot of resources, which grew to end up being about 15 fires across the North State. What we're going to do is we're going to get the perspective of the initial attack incident commanders, what they were seeing, what they had to deal with, what they had. We'll transition. We'll talk to our operations section chief about the current picture and what we're planning on doing, what the team is doing. And from there, we'll pass it along to county OES and various county officials to be able to let you know how to get put back together. So to begin, on the night of the fire, at 22:52 hours, there was a fire called in North San Juan, and that was we had a high dispatch for that, so we dispatched our standard complement, which is quite a few engines moving out from the various locations of the unit, including not only just CALFire, but our partners in local government, federal resources, and we started to move on those things. At 23:04, excuse my military time, at 11:04, the Cascade Fire started in Yuba County. At 11:08, a fire broke in Wheatland. And so these are all separate responses going out to these fires in a driving wind, which I don't have to tell you. That was a tough night with wind. At 11:33, a fire broke in Smartsville. It ended up materializing, but a response went to that area. And at 11:34, the Lobo fire started in the Rough and Ready area. At 11:37, the McCourtney fire started. And so all of the regional resources at that time were extremely taxed. We're all engaged in firefighting in various locations throughout the unit. So that's kind of the backdrop of what was going on while you were sleeping. And then when you woke up, I think you know the rest of that story. But what I want to share with you tonight is this unit, our local government partners, Chief Jim Turner's over there from Consolidated. We were all engaged in trying to make this bad situation better. What became very clear in the early stages of this was we have reached max capacity. We have tapped not only our resources locally, but also neighboring units were having the same kind of activity. The Butte unit was having the Cherokee fire, which ultimately became a fire, grew to about 9,000 acres, and the LaPorte fire, which started in Bangor, with the same outcome of the Cascade fire, and essentially destroyed the town of Bangor, and with the Cascade destroying the town of Loma Rica. So that's the backdrop of what was going on. So at this point, I'd like to call up Battalion Chief Jim Hudson to describe the beginning stages of the Lobo fire. It'll be a quick briefing.
Thank you. So I actually got to the fire in the early hours of the morning, and I'm going to take you through everything that happened until I got there as for the Lobo incident. So at about 11:30 on Sunday night, orienting yourself on the map, that little piece of red up there, that's Lone Lobo Trail. That's where the fire was initially started. With all Chief Morris talked about the fires that were going on, we had significant resource drawdown. The local government engines that arrived, and they found it to be about 1 acre. They made a very aggressive stop on the forward progression of the fire and kept it under 10 acres. So that's 11:30 at night. Approximately 3 in the morning, the wind had significantly increased, and they noticed fire below them down towards Jury Creek, which if you look just below the name Branch 2, it's spotted into there. It was 4 to 5 acres initially, and that was about 3:06 in the morning. By 3:30 in the morning, they were requesting more engines that just weren't available. By 4:30 in the morning, they were estimating it to be 400 to 500 acres. So great aggressive stop, but you can have all the line and hose around it in the world, but when the wind came up like that, it just blew it right down against the terrain, downhill, and we're getting significant spotting. I arrived at probably around 5 in the morning and assumed command. At that time, there was 10 engines there, and we set some objectives looking at grand scale, bigger picture, hard wind. Our objectives were to keep the fire south of Bittany Springs Road, west of Rough and Ready Highway, north of Highway 20, and east of Lake Wildwood. When I arrived, evacuations had taken place. We were estimated that there was a fair amount of homes that were involved or structures involved with fire. Evacuations have already been put in place for the Rough and Ready community proper, and the discussion was to start evacuating Lake Wildwood. The eastern edge was under an advisory, and we decided to evacuate all of Lake Wildwood. So when I assumed command, made a large resource augmentation, and that was able to start coming in over the next couple days, but we were under severe drawdown for resources. About midday, we pulled a spot weather forecast, or requested one, and it was projected that the winds were going to shift. So when the wind shifted, it started to take it back towards the northeast with our southwest wind, and then the priority changed also. Our significant threat was to Bittany Springs, and then so for those of you who live there, that's why we put the advisory there, because the wind did a 180 on us later that day. And then we put an advisory also into the town of Rough and Ready. By 9 in the morning, once we were 7:30 to 9, we had the aircraft start coming up, and it was estimated to be about 900 acres. It's still somewhere in that ballpark. Haven't seen a lot of growth since then. The winds have been in our favor. So, and I'll let the operations chiefs talk about what we've had since that first 24 to 30 hours.
Okay, so next I'll call up Battalion Chief Landon Hack, who was who took initial IC after Jim Turner had it, and he'll give a brief on what the McCourtney fire was doing in its early moments.
Good evening. The McCourtney fire started about 11:37. I was woken up at about midnight, responded from my residence, about 3 miles away. When I got there, I met with Chief Turner, who already had a command structure set up and was working on building a plan. and it was a well-built plan, and I was able to just build off of what he had already had set up. We were under the impression it was about 300 acres, and just with the conditions, the wind, the smoke, roads being blocked by trees, power lines, people coming out, made it very difficult to really get a true assessment. So we kind of drew a big picture. This is what we think we have. Set some objectives at that point, which were to keep the fire basically in a triangle, if you will, from the origin inside of Auburn Road, McCourtney Road, and then out to Thoroughbred Loop, if you're familiar with that area. Stepping back and looking at it and figuring I had about 300 acres and looking at the resources that I had at scene and responding, and knowing I was very quickly brought into the bigger picture that was going on throughout the counties. And knowing that we weren't going to have a lot of resources, I put in a very large order for resources almost immediately. So then the transition with Chief Turner went really well. I kept him right there for that. He has a very good local knowledge and access to resources and people that could help out that I don't have locally. We then came up with some plans for contingency, pulled an evacuation order that pushed it out from what they originally had all the way out to Wolf Mountain Lookout Road, basically out to the landfill. And then using Ponderosa Way was going to be where we were going to try and hold it if we couldn't keep it in this original box that we had. That was the evacuation order. We instantly, when I assumed command, we started getting phone calls, or the command center was getting phone calls and conveying those to us for residents that were trapped, either by power lines down and they couldn't get out in their vehicles, or trees were down, or they were out in their vehicles and trapped by fire. So for probably about the first hour that I was there, the majority of action that was being taken by the engine companies at scene was affecting those rescues and evacuations. So they really didn't have time to focus on perimeter control or defending structures. They were really, truly trying to just get people out and get people out from in front and get that evacuation done. That was about the first hour. After that, it slowed down a little bit. Pretty much everybody in the area was awake and getting out of there. And we were able to focus more so on perimeter control and preventing structure loss. And that, we were then able to keep the fire in that original box. So it ended up being, it shrunk in size once we got good intelligence on it, and we're able to really get out there and see it and focus more on where it was and what it was doing than getting folks out of the way of it. We got it down to about, I think it ended up 76 acres, something like that. And that took till about 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I was able to say with confidence to the command center that the forward progress of the fire had been stopped and that it wasn't moving outward anymore. There was still a lot of interior burning. There was still a lot of defensive structures that was going on, active firefighting that the engine companies were doing. But the fire wasn't getting any bigger at that point, which was our main goal then.
Thank you, Landon. So at 1 a.m. that morning, knowing that the system was, we were severely taxed, knowing that this could potentially go on for a long duration, made the decision to order up an incident management team. Now, CALFire has 6 incident management teams across the state. 4 of them are deployed right now in the North State alone. and are definitely trying to make a real tough situation better. And I'll tell you, incident management team 2, led by Chief Patterson, has done that for you in this community, and he's kept what we were able to get stabilized. By the time they showed up, it stayed stabilized. And so we lost a lot of property, and people lost their lives. Over the last couple of days, it's been really tough on this community. It's been tough on the responders that help you. But this team, I have supreme confidence in them that they're going to button this thing up and we'll be done. Today, containment on the Cascade Fire is at 45%, a market improvement from the day before. 25% on the LaPorte Fire. The Lobo Fire is sitting at 52% contained, and the McCourtney at 89%. So we are in a better situation than we were. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Charlie Blankenheim to give he's the operations section chief on the team, to give a briefing of the current status.
Good afternoon. So when we got the call, like you said, around 3 o'clock or so in the morning, the team was coming in, and we were hearing all kinds of different things. We were hearing Butte had a big fire going that we were going to take, and there was a fire in Loma Rica that we were going to take, and then there was the fire in Grass Valley that turned out to be the McCourtney, and then there was the fire in Rough and Ready. So it's kind of a different situation for us. Normally we're coming into one fire, and we get the objectives from the unit on where they want to hold this fire. The first probably day, we spent most of our time trying to figure out which fire needed the most resources. We had very, very limited. We were told right off, you're not going to get any more help. Make it work with what you got. So for the McCourtney, we were hearing 300 acres and significantly threatening the town of Grass Valley, and it was going to be in downtown. And we heard, there was a lot of potential to it. Thank goodness that didn't play out. We had some real good folks. The unit did an incredible job with their initial attack. And by the time we really sat down that next morning and started looking at things in the daylight, we realized they've caught the McCourtney. It's probably not going to get much bigger. They've done a good job. It was a really terrible situation. They've done an incredible job. And we pretty much left the initial attack stuff on the McCourtney for 2 or 3 days. Some of those engine strike teams stayed there for, I think, 3 days mopping it up. Just we had no relief for them, but they were holding their own, and we just kind of left it to them. They did a really good job. The Lobo was a little more dynamic. We were there was a lot of concerns. This for the first 2 days, this was the number one priority. We were getting the wind event or weather forecast that the next day could very well be the same as the day before, that we could get another strong northerly push during the day and another strong northeast push overnight. The red flag warning still had about 24 hours left in it when we got here. So our biggest concern was obviously the Wildwood States subdivision. We started building some contingency line out there. One of the things we did have going for us, besides the unit's really good knowledge and really aggressive attack, one of our branch directors on a team grew up. He was a Nevada Union High School guy. He works in Santa Cruz now, but he was in Rowdy. He'd spent his whole life here hunting in the hills here, and he was talking to Jimmy on the way in ahead of time. So by the time he got here, they had their kind of plan worked out. Nick knew exactly where he wanted to go with the contingency line and threats we had in the different subdivisions and stuff. So we had really good local knowledge coming in to support what the unit had, and that helped out. Nick ended up tying in with Jim, and then we had the battalion chief from Auburn, who's also a really good fireman up here, and they had a really good plan with very, very limited resources. One of the things we like to do on stuff like this, when we have a big structure threat like Wildwood would have been, is we like to get out into Wildwood and prep around the houses and start preparing around the houses for when the fire comes. So we had some really tough decisions to make early on whether we were going to catch it where it was or whether we started going for the structure protection mode. And we decided Nick decided with the unit that we had a chance to catch it where it was. So we took a chance that the wind wasn't going to really hurt us the next day, and they put a really aggressive firefight in that whole next day. And like some of those strike teams were there for 2 or 3 days, taking naps here and there, and they really held it to pretty much where it was when the team got here. I don't think the fire grew much at all once the team got here. I mean, it got a little bit bigger to the south, but for the most part, it stayed where it was. So it was a really good job by the unit and some of the local guys. So where we're at today. So I think I didn't look at tonight's numbers. What you said, 52%? So, and that's actually probably going to go up in the morning. I just talked to same Nick Cashy, the guy that's been out there, and he's really confident that The big piece down here is black and is mopped up, and this piece is mopped up. So those numbers are probably going to start going up. The big event today, as most of you know, was we repopulated the entire fire today. PG&E's done a really good job fixing all of their infrastructure out there. I think there's still quite a few folks that don't have power yet, but those are just the individual house drops. All of their main transmission lines and everything, they put up all the new poles, and everything is in pretty good situation out there. So we anticipate this fire getting no bigger. We've got a couple more days of mopping up the hot stuff interior, patrolling. One of the successes we had was we had enough engines that first morning and a half or so to mop up around all of the houses that didn't get burned, and that's a big deal. When we have these wind events, we end up losing structures a day later because we just don't have enough folks to mop up around the houses, and wood piles and things catch on fire. Did not happen on this fire. We had the resources were very aggressive and got it up and cleaned up around the houses really well. We're still in that process. We're still making sure that there's no heat around the houses, mopping up stumps and wood piles, and that seems to be going really well. So like I said, we anticipate no more movement on the fire, and I think things are looking really good, and we're really glad we got everybody back in.
Thank you. You know, we're talking about the firefighting effort, but there is a huge effort that goes on to evacuate people in these circumstances. And the Nevada County Sheriff's Office, the California Highway Patrol, local law enforcement from Grass Valley, Nevada City, everywhere that it could be mustered came here to effect the evacuations. And I want to talk about the time frame on some of these fires. The Cascade Fire, which didn't affect this community, but it did affect Loma Rica. There's a fire that did affect this community in the late 1980s, and that was a 49er fire, and this community talks about it a lot. We had a loss of that caliber, that amount of structures destroyed, and injuries in about an hour and a half time frame. And so that's what was going on there. And so for our partners in law enforcement to effect evacuations under those circumstances, they really did a great job given what they were facing. And this time I'd like to pass it to Captain Shannon Moon.
Thank you, George. On behalf of Keith Royal, we're here to talk about the call and how we responded to the 911 calls. As most of everyone knows, our regional dispatch center answers all 911 calls in the community. So that on Sunday evening, our first 911 call came in at 11:48. At the time, for the sheriff's office resources, what I had on my patrol team was a sergeant and 3 officers patrolling the areas in western Nevada County. And that's a normal patrol shift. Typically, we will have 1 sergeant and 4. On Sunday evening, we had 1 sergeant and 3 officers. So once that first call came in, and we started working the McCourtney fire clearly first. We knew that Lobo was a fire call. They hadn't requested services. The fire department hadn't requested services for us yet on Lobo. So McCourtney was where we started first. I got my phone call from my lieutenant, Sam Brown, immediately reported in because, of course, I did survive here through the 49er fire, seeing the winds, watching the news, understanding what everybody else was responding to in Northern California. I knew this was something that we were going to have to really put a lot of resources on. So I responded to our dispatch center along with Lieutenant Brown, and immediately knew we needed more resources. Without even having to make a phone call, our brothers and sisters from Grass Valley Police Department, California Highway Patrol, and Nevada City Police Department responded immediately. So that was through collaboration, through great relationships that we already have. It's a testament to the kind of law enforcement services that you have in your community here. Knowing what we had, Lieutenant Brown has worked search and rescue for several years. He put an immediate call out to Cal OES law enforcement for mutual aid because we knew we needed more officers. So at that point, we had officers from the Placer County Sheriff's Office, Roseville Police Department, and Lincoln Police Department respond immediately to help us with evacuations. At 3 o'clock, we knew we had probably at that point, we had about 20 sheriff's deputies respond from our phone call saying, we need to come in, you need to help us evacuate our community. So with the sheriff's office, 20 uniformed officers, we were able to move from the McCourtney fire over to Lobo in the rough and ready area and do as many evacuations as we could. Lieutenant Brown put out what we call a code red, which is the reverse 911 that I know most of you got in this community. If you didn't have power, clearly sometimes you don't get that phone call, right? Because it's software. It's software based. We put it into a computer system, and then it dials lots of different phone calls at once. So since we knew that the power was out, we started doing some roving patrols. You had deputy sheriffs and our mutual aid friends knocking on doors trying to get people up and get evacuated and help people get out. On Tuesday, while we were doing this, that's when both the Van Tam fire and Garden Bar fire started. I was in the field doing some assessments with our county building department and our search and rescue crew, trying to determine if we did have any loss of life in some areas that we knew were probably not the best for our evacuation notices. And in that time frame, Lieutenant Brown was in our IC at the fire department at the fairgrounds, and helped deploy resources for the people that were getting evacuated on Garden. We didn't have any physical evacuations for Van Tam fire on McCourtney on Tuesday, but what we did evacuate was Sammy's Friends Animal Services, which we evacuated all of the animals in that in their facility in under an hour. And that's because of a lot of, again, community support. Our animal control services, our senior animal control officer, Stephanie Geckler, basically managed that herself, and within 1 hour had every animal out of Sammy's Friends over to Nevada County Fairgrounds to make sure that they were safe. We had no other evacuations, no human evacuations on Van Tam, but we knew that would be a difficult thing to evacuate, so that was the call that was made there. The Garden fire, again, at the same time, more resources, lots of people. We were able to get some more deputies out in front of that fire. And when I say what the sheriff's office does when a fire occurs, when the fire department asks for our assistance, is we send a person to the field to marry up with the incident commander that's in the field, and that they're able to listen to basically the conditions of the fire, and trying to get out in front of that fire and listening to the fire department and really try to get out in front so that we can avoid loss of life. Whereas they're looking at more of the property end, we're looking at more of the people end. With that, the rest of us in management hang out with our county leaders and make sure that they have the information that they need that's coming directly from our incident commanders that are in the field. So again, that comes with a lot of training. That comes with a lot of collaboration and relationships that you already have with the county team in making sure that we know what resources we have and how to get them out. Any other things, Lieutenant Brown, that you have for evacuations? So overall numbers, we did write down some of our overall numbers on how many homes we evacuated and how many 911 calls that came into the regional dispatch center. So agency assist came clearly from Grass Valley Police Department, Nevada City Police Department, California Highway Patrol, Placer County Sheriff, Lincoln PD, Roseville PD. Nevada County Probation came out and helped us do some security at some of our shelters. And then we couldn't have been able to evacuate Lake Wildwood without the help from Lake Wildwood Security. We did have social media reporting that we had some missing people and unaccounted for people, but we were able to account for everyone. So at this point, we have nobody that's not accounted for, that's missing or unaccounted for in our community. We also had some social media outlets saying that there was some looting going on and some burglaries going on inside our fire area. And what we did was, after we made our evacuations, we upstaffed and did some roving patrols that were just assigned to the evacuated areas. And within that time frame, we contacted some people. We had 8 reported thefts and 5 burglary reports. All of them were unfounded. So those were either not looting, not burglaries. We had a report of a burglary in progress in Lake Wildwood. It was a homeowner on outside the fence trying to get into their property and jump the fence. So our officers look at that as a looting, right, as a burglary in progress. Fortunately, it was not. It was a homeowner trying to get some property out of their residence there on the east side of Lake Wildwood. The ability of our dispatch, we had a sergeant and 3 officers on patrol. I had 2 dispatchers working in my dispatch center. Within that first 24-hour period, they answered 494 911 calls, two dispatchers. And they had 1,197 emergency administrative calls that they took. Lots of people calling our dispatch center asking, should I evacuate? And if anybody called in, our dispatchers told you, if you got the phone call, you should probably evacuate. Our 3rd dispatcher arrived because she heard about it. She didn't have to wait to get called in. She heard about it. She said, I need to get in there and help my coworkers. Lots of 911 calls for down trees, power lines, and lots of medical calls. So your services at the sheriff's office, I couldn't be prouder for the officers and what we provided to this community. So thank you.
One thing I did want to bring up, though, is there were some questions of why we evacuated Lake Wildwood. Some people felt like the fire was further away. We worked with the fire incident management team before we made those decisions. If you look at the fire perimeter and you're looking at what's going on, it looks like it's really far away from Lake Wildwood, but there's spot firing that was occurring outside of the perimeter that was also going on at the same time. So even though the perimeter is there, the fire spotting that was being reported was closer to about less than a mile within Lake Wildwood. Obviously, for folks that live in there, it takes a long time to get out. One of the things our guys faced evacuating people is that there was a lot of folks that needed help moving, did not have cars, had no way out. So if we stopped at a house, it could take us 3 seconds. It could take us 45 minutes to transport somebody. And we faced a lot of that. And we definitely transported a lot of people to shelters that were set up by the county and by Red Cross to get them to some services, ambulances transported. It's not an easy process, so I do know there was some frustration from people of why was I evacuated, why can't I go home, and these are all the things that come up, is that all those resources that it takes to get people out, and because of good reason, they weren't made lightly, those decisions. When I turn to my captain and say, we're going to evacuate Lake Wildwood, and she says, give me a call, those are tough decisions to make, and the same with McCourtney and everywhere else. Those are real hard. But once that's done, if we put people back in and they're in jeopardy and we have to go get them, there might be other people that need help. And now we're doubling up our role. And so I understand the frustrations. I'm really sorry. My family as well was evacuated. It's hard, but we appreciate everybody working together. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to invite John Gulsarian up from Nevada County OES. He's a program manager. And to give a perspective, he managed the EOC through this entire process, fielding probably thousands of calls, trying to figure out how to get large animals out and all the other things that come with these disasters. And he's had a heavy lift along with the multitude of county staff who have come in to help staff that EOC and make that work. And so, John Gulsarian.
Good evening, John Gulsarian, OES program manager. So I got a phone call just before 1 o'clock, and we pretty much activated at the Emergency Operations Center, and we're on scene here about 1:20 in the morning. And when they're doing evacuations, my priority or our priority in the Emergency Operations Center is to get shelters going. And we're trying to determine a location for a shelter. And it was a little bit of a challenge to get a hold of some shelter folks at the churches, and the Red Cross was already inbound. But that was our biggest priority, is get shelters open for folks to go to. And then immediately after that, the next thing is the animal sheltering. And they evacuated. There was numerous animals evacuated. I think we had, 200 horses at one time? But it's just crazy. And, the population of the animal shelter goes up, down, so it's just unbelievable. But we were fortunate. We got the shelters opened up pretty quick, and I think we got morning breakfast for folks from the Salvation Army. They were here pretty quickly. That was awesome. We've now used them twice between the February storms and then for here, and we're very pleased with them, and I'm hoping that you folks that were stuck in the shelter were pleased with the meals there too. So now the next thing we do is we go into what's called recovery mode, trying to get back to normal, and sometimes it takes time. It can be challenging. Some things are easy, some things are not so easy, but we'll tell you that the phone line that we have open, the information phone line, will remain open pretty much for 9 to 5 every day. I don't know if you guys have the number, but the number is 265-1218. The Twin Cities Church, they've closed, and along with the First Baptist Church, so we have no more people shelters. The animal shelter is still open, probably for another day, so folks can pick up their animals and clear out. We just want to remind folks to bring their ID card, because that's how you get your animal back. Sometimes other folks like to come and take animals, and it's not really nice. And yes, it has happened. So social services, some of the county staff here, if I can just really quick introduce them. Our social services director, Mike. This is just after the meeting if you have any questions. Environmental health director, Amy. And then a building, Nick, if I'm correct. And our CDA director, Sean Powers. So just want to introduce them that. So for emergency social services stuff, CalFresh is doing refreshment on the cards. I don't quite understand all that stuff, but I know that on zip codes listed 95, 975, 95, and 946, they're going to be receiving a supplemental amount to their cards, I guess, that works. The state is currently replenishing all these cards. The next question is for Community Development Agency. We're working with the Red Cross, the state, to work on cleaning up these lots, the sites. That can take some time, but we're trying to get this done quickly before the rains come. It's a lot easier to get the stuff now than after the rains hit. Let me see. And pretty much we're doing everything we can to help the residents. It's just a lot of special cases. Some things take a long time or more time than we would like. It was hard for us today, or for me, to listen to some of the phone calls that came in on the phone line. There's some really sad, devastating stories, and it's challenging for us too. You know, we hear the stories and it hurts a little bit. Environmental health, like I said, you may have some questions for that. I know how do you get started? What do you do? And then the first thing you do is take that first step and start for the rebuilding portion of it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Another very important step in the rebuilding process for those of you who have suffered so much loss is the part that the assessor plays. And this is Sue Horn, the county assessor, and she's got some information about how to start that process.
First of all, I just want to express my sympathy for all of your loss and for all that you are going through. And I want to do everything I can and our office can to alleviate some of that pain, if we can, in regards to your property tax. California tax law allows me to have your assessed value reduced, reflecting your damaged property as it is. So there are some conditions for that. Number one, the threshold of damage has to be $10,000, more than $10,000. And even if you're not sure of what that is, in order to receive an immediate relief on your property tax bill. If you're not sure what that is, I want you to fill out a calamity relief form. I have packets here. Some of you may already be on a list that I've been provided to by CALFire, and I've got packets ready in your name. If you're not on the list, I have extra packets, so you can take that home with you tonight. You need to fill out this calamity relief form, and what that will do is start the process of my office and appraisers in my office to go out and look at your property, get in touch with you, and assess what damage has been done monetarily to your property. That also includes, even if you didn't have a structure burnt, if your land got decimated, you have a land value allocation to your property tax, and we will reflect that. The trigger is it has to be $10,000 or more. Now, for those of you that have 10,000 or more and you pay your property tax by the bill that you receive, which those tax bills are going out tomorrow. Yeah, great timing, huh? Well, so if you pay that property tax bill in that manner, and it's not handled through your mortgage lender, you can receive immediate tax relief, and that bill is not due. You will receive and this is on your first payment only. You will receive a corrected bill after my office and my appraisers determine what that is with your involvement in that. And then you will have 30 days once you receive that corrected bill to pay that tax. So it's really important, if you've had damage and you think it might be 10,000 or more, to see me after, and I'll have a packet for you if you're on the list. And if you're not on the list, I have 50 extra packets. You can also download this form from my website. Go to the assessor's homepage, go to mynevadacounty.com, go to the assessor's homepage, and there's a big icon there that says, click on this, and it will take you to the form directly. If you have any questions, which I'm sure you will, be sure to call my office. It's 265-1232, and we're standing ready to assist you in whatever way we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I'm going to bring up the Incident Commander of CALFire Incident Management Team 2, Chief Glenn Patterson, to talk about what the team's doing to take this across the finish line. And then after that, we'll open it up for a short question and answer period, and I'll just kind of explain that at that time.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, everybody. Just real quick. So the team comes in. You've heard a lot about it. Just give you a brief explanation. The incident command teams, the incident management teams, as they're properly named, it's a group of 53 fire, civilian, and law enforcement individuals in designated command positions from all across the state. So when we get tasked to respond, we're not involved in the local area. All of our people, I'm from Riverside. I have people from all over the state. So we have the luxury of not being involved in what Chief Morris was dealing with. So we come in and we're asked to pick up where they left off. So we come in with all of the designated and needed positions and that they cannot fill because everybody's fighting fire. I don't come with any fire engines or any crews or any water. I just come with 53 highly trained individuals, specifically trained for the positions they fill, and we pick up the incident and manage it and take it through its completion. So we'll be here until the repopulation is done, the fire is completely out and mopped up to where we're sure all of them are not getting any bigger. We organize the resources. We help the unit do everything that they didn't have the people to do. It's not that they can't do it, but when they have this much fire and this many incidents, it takes more people, and that's what we bring. So we're all from the same department, and or many different departments, but we're all doing the same job. The team is just a group of people that come in. So that's what our job is, and we will be here until all 4 fires. So we were tasked with 4 fires, 2 in Nevada County, 1 in Yuba County, 1 in Butte. So close to 20,000 acres, almost 200 homes, and 4 lives lost. So it was a bad situation. But one thing I do want to tell you is that from looking from the outside in, that when we got here, even though it seemed very hectic, it was an organized firefight. The local cooperators, the local CALFire unit, did a tremendous, phenomenal job of taking care of things here. And I want you to know that without their efforts, many more lives would have been lost and many more houses would have been lost. And they did an excellent job. And they made it very easy for us to come in and pick up where they left off. So they did a great job. So with that, for myself or Chief Morris, we'll just open it up to any questions.
Now I want to point out as well, you have 2 of your elected leaders here, Supervisor Ed Schofield and Supervisor Hank Weston. And any questions that come up that involve steps moving forward, they're listening. Their staff's listening. So any questions that you have, we're going to do a short question and answer period. We're going to run that for about 15 minutes, and so that you can sidebar and get a little more of that personal time afterwards. So at this point, yeah, we'll field any questions that you may have and get it to the appropriate staff. Yes, ma'am.
When can we get an excavator in to take all the debris away?
Okay, the question is, when can we get an excavator in to take the debris away? And so environmental health might want to cover that one.
Hi, good evening. Amy Irani, Environmental Health. So right now what we're working on is coordinating getting folks from Department of Toxic Substances and Control, I'll throw an acronym at you, DTSC. Once we get approval, which we will, bring the folks in, and then sometime next week, we're hoping by Thursday or Friday, they'll come in and they'll go to each site individually. And what they're going to do first is they're going to assess to see if there's any type of hazardous household waste on site, and they're going to take an assessment to see if there's any asbestos-related material. They're specifically focusing on mobile homes for asbestos-related material, and also looking at homes that were built 1980 and earlier. So what they'll do is on site, when they assess all of these items, they'll remove the household hazardous waste and remove any asbestos waste. Yes, and so that's a huge bonus for us. And then also at the same time, working with our Public Works Department, we're in communication with Waste Management. So after the fact, we have a gentleman here. If you could, yes, he's here to help out. They've got a great team coming in. We want to remove the hazardous material first, and what I'll do is work with the. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. If you could tell me. California Southern Baptist Disaster Relief, and he introduced himself to me this evening. Forgive me, Rob, for not remembering your name, but his team, once we get the hazardous materials off, we can coordinate getting roll-off boxes with Waste Management, working with his dedicated team. They just came back from Houston. They do some great work, and then set up at each of the properties to see how we can help all of you that have been affected and get your properties cleaned up. So we are continuing this process to try to find relief for you and clean up for your properties. Yes, ma'am.
We are not on the site. There's nothing to read. There's nothing there. How will you get our contact information? Our landline is burned out. I have a cell phone, but I'm not able to phone on my cellular. So how will we know when this building is at our site?
So excellent. I will defer to John. There's got to be a collection of names and addresses. I think we had a survey form out front that folks can get and fill out. So I would encourage you to do that before you leave tonight. But the other thing is what we'll do. Every property owner, just so you know, before DTSC can come on your property to do the work, you're going to have to sign a right of entry for them. They're going to need permission to come onto your private property, so they'll have documentation. They'll need you to fill out, so absolutely we'll be in touch with you. We'll have you sign that documentation so they can do the assessment, okay? So, but I think the forms out front is what you should fill out. Department of Toxic Substances Control, DT, T as in Tom, SC. Yes, sorry, gentleman. So what we'll try to do, and in an emergency situation like this, just like, for example, hauling all of the waste to a landfill, you talk about an inordinate amount of waste. In an emergency situation, there are certain waivers that we can put into play or work with the state and the feds to put these waivers into play. So if there are situations where you've got massive amounts of product that needs to be cleaned up, again, working with other agencies that come in to help property owners. If there are situations that require special permits, we'll work with building, CDA. We'll work you through this process in an expedited format to make the process easy for you. It's not something that we're going to hold up, if that answers your question.
Yeah, well, I was just worried about how fast we can clean up and get it out of there without having to pay a property permit, just to get stuff done.
Hopefully I answered your question. If not, my director, Sean, can follow up. Let me get the gentleman back here, ma'am, really quick. Yes, sir. Okay, so what you're asking about is your loss? Is your property? Okay, so I believe that, and you know, I'm not an expert on insurance, but hopefully you had a renter's insurance policy for your personal items. I think the rest of the onus would lay on the property owner or the building owner for their recouping their costs, is what I would just make that assumption. So I'm hoping that you had an insurance to cover your property as a renter of that building to recoup that cost of your loss. Yes, ma'am. At this point, I think that the most important thing to remember is what they're going to do when the folks come out from the state agency, they're going to look immediately for hazards. And they're the experts, so they're going to come out and assess. So you're talking about a lot of metal. I'm not sure that we're in the mode to say, for example, collect and store or recycle. So the impetus will be to get it off the property so you can start anew. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So I think that starting first, and I can always defer this to John, but doing the survey first is important. Sue Horn had mentioned for property assessment, it's important that you get that relief for your taxes and for tax bills. The other thing I want all property owners to please consider, if you're returning to your home, and I understand you want to return to your property, I absolutely understand that. I'm very empathetic with it, but if you could leave your property as it is and not do any disturbance yet, because there are health protections you should put into play, especially with ash and other products on your property. So if you give us a few days, let the folks from the state come down, assess your property first before we go in there and start doing a lot of work yourself. I appreciate that would be very challenging, but if you could wait just for your protection and health to let us do that assessment first. Okay, but I think absolutely filling out the survey form, getting your name to us and how we contact you is very important. Yes, sir.
Okay, so as we transition out of the firefighting mode, we'll get into a suppression repair mode where we'll put water bars over those doors. We're going to try to put it back to a reasonable natural state if we can, within the limits of law. If there's secondary damage to your property, your structure, we have a comps claim unit that can address those issues and help you through that process. But we're not going to leave it the way you see it right now. Yes, sir.
Do you have any estimate as to when we can gain access to the property on Lone Loban?
I don't have any specific information on that right now. Is anybody from the team able to? It's open, so we've released all of that. Yes, sir. The cause of every fire that I've talked about is under investigation. Yes, ma'am.
The county has a code red system, and that will do that, and you can register online at My Nevada. Yes, you can register your cell phones and everything else online. And if you need help, you can give me a call, and it's on our website. You go to mynevada.com, and then OES, Office of Emergency Services, and you'll scroll down a little bit, and you'll see a code red button. And if you need help, just please feel free to call me. It's not a problem.
Ma'am in the black shirt again? Yes. Oh, I said ma'am. I didn't hear. Ma'am. All right, a little levity, that's good.
So it's a really good question, and it's something that everybody faced, and we heard a lot about it. Code Red, which what everybody talked about and has heard about, like John had said, you can go to mynevadacounty.com and you go to the Office of Emergency Services on the departments page, and on there it does allow you to register for Code Red. You can do a cell phone, you can do a house phone, you can do text message, you can set up for email alerts. They have an app as well. That's not a save-all. One thing people may not know yet is that Rough and Ready cell tower had gone down. It's burnt up, and that stopped communications for a lot of people. So some folks that may have even had Code Red or a notification system didn't have that ability. And that is why law enforcement ends up going into the locations, and we start doing door-to-door evacuations to the best of our abilities. And that's why when we stop at somebody's house and we say, hey, it's time to go, we really don't have time to discuss why we want you to go. We need to get to the next house. Unfortunately, people want to talk about it. They want to discuss it, and they want to argue it, and we just don't have that time to do it. And so if we sounded rude, things like that. So we were grateful for the bullhorns. I think that was actually the Lake Wildwood security on the bullhorn, and we may have been as well out of our cars, but we're pretty much doing anything and everything we can to get folks out as quick as possible. We're pretty fortunate to have Code Red. It did not always exist. We did have a program called City Watch, but prior to that, it was your neighbor coming to your house to tell you to go, and I know that happened too. So it's really just being vigilant and not taking it lightly, that when a fire comes in here, these guys know better than we do, that when it hits, it's time to go. And when you can see flames, it's probably time to get moving, especially when you're in a small, tight community. The ingress and egress of all of your guys' communities, whether you're Lake Wildwood or Rough and Ready, there's usually one or two roads in and out. And if you don't get out of that, you can get gridlocked off of there. So hopefully that answers your question. But that's how we attempt. You could come into the county and we. Sure. Well, unfortunately, I mean, we're not everywhere, and we're not going to be. Yeah. You can come into the county, or you can go to the library. They also have computer access at the library where you can go. So anywhere you go to get computer access is accessible, and the library has a great system where you can go in. It's free. You can use the computer at any time. So you gotta kind of come up with some ideas, and if you don't have help, a neighbor, everybody in this room is together on this. So finding those resources, even in the sheriff's office, I think our little computer in the front allows access, and we could help you out if you need to as well. Hold on one second.
I'm thinking about the firefighters and deputies, mustered to do what we want. And I cannot tell you how much I
Yeah, we've heard that question multiple times. Right now you could move a trailer back into your property because, it is open and access, but we have some concerns long-term about what your septic looks like, what your well looks like. I've seen the pictures of the houses, so I can imagine what your well and your wellhead. So for a couple days, that's pretty good, but we do have some site concerns with DTSC. For now, we'd ask you, if you've got your trailer somewhere, it's probably best that it's not on your site. But as we go long-term, if there's opportunities to pull a trailer in, get it hooked back up into your septic and well, we'll definitely work with you as much as possible to make that happen, depending on what the conditions are. But I think the site assessment and DTSC, making sure it's safe to do so, is kind of our top priority right now. That'll kind of be a tier 2, but if we can make that accommodation to at least get you back on your property with some resources, we're going to make every available option to do that. So my name is Sean Powers. I'm the Community Development Agency Director. So everything land use related is my shop. If you guys have questions outside this meeting, our actual double doors are right there, right we're in the downstairs lobby. That's building, planning, environmental health. So as the incident closes down in the rebuilding phase, that really comes through our double doors. I can't emphasize enough that we actually get your contact information. That's going to kind of become our quasi-VIP list to make sure we're giving you the best service possible, as expeditious as possible for everything that's actually happened here. So we want to make our full resources available for you to get through this as quick as we can. Any of the reconstruction that would require a permit will require a permit because we want to make sure it's rebuilt adequately and safely to code. But you'll quasi be to the front of the line with that. We'll prioritize those. We have a very efficient building department. We're going to make sure you get the gold standard treatment. Okay. I think the gentleman in the blue jacket in the back actually had his hand up. Good choice.
There is no program like that. I think the county had something in the past, but
you can go online to readyforwildfire.org, and we have this concept of ready, set, go. And I see the flyer right there. Thank you, sir. That's got some preparedness checklists in there, so you can do that pre-work because nobody's ready for that call at 1 in the morning and 3 in the morning. So I would just advise anybody that's here, that's listening, that's watching on the live stream to go to readyforwildfire.org. And it'll give you some prompts to think about things that you don't want to think about in that moment. So, yes, Bill. Okay. Okay, and at this point, we'll take one more question in this forum. Member staff is going to be here. We can take sidebars if you were reticent to speak in front of everybody. Last question, sir. And I would just make the caveat that drone use over an active fire, a bad idea. So let's get this thing done before we go there. But that's a beautiful offer, sir. Thank you, folks, for your time. And remember, we're here to answer any questions you have, and hang in there.